Pod. Welcome back to another episode of Say Who, Say Pod. He's Danny O'Neil in a sports coat, home from Japan. A lengthy, luxurious trip to Japan. I'm Christian Caple. Did you just raise your voice at me?
I did not raise my voice. Although, I must say, there are certain things like that. That is the power move of all power moves when you get in a dispute. Is if you can say to the other person, did you just raise your voice at me? Because it's very difficult to have a counter move. Because your choices are to get quiet, at which point you're basically yielding to the person who's just called you out. Or the other one is you just have to fully commit to it. I'll raise my voice whenever I want to, at which point you're kind of making an ass out of yourself.
For those unaware, this is a reference to UCLA men's basketball coach Mick Cronin, who, in response to a question that he deemed the worst he'd ever received in his career, in fact, after UCLA's blowout loss at Michigan State on Tuesday, he snapped back at the reporter. Did you just raise your voice at me? The reporter very much had not, by the way. It was
Not really, but the volume had gone up a little bit. Here's the exchange.
What was your thoughts in the student section chanting Booker's name?
I could give a rat's ass about the other team's student section.
I just meant the overall the way that you
I would like to give you a kudos for the worst question I've ever been asked.
All right.
Did you like
You should take it.
the preparation of the...
You really think I care about the other team's
No, I don't.
student
I don't
section?
think you care about the other.
Are you raising your voice at me?
No, I'm just.
Yeah, you are.
talking.
Yeah, you are. Come on, dude.
No reason.
Come on. Yes, you are. Everybody's standing here listening to you. Everybody. This is on camera. They can hear you. I answered the question. I could give a rat's ass about the other team's student section. I coach UCLA. I don't care about Michigan State students. I mean, who cares?
Incredible. This was after, again, a blowout loss in which he ejected one of his own players.
Threw his own guy off the floor. Get out of here. The one really tricky thing, and I've seen this go both ways, because I've seen reporters behave like jerks to a coach or a player, but when there's a certain amount of cooperation and trust that generally has to happen in those post-game environments. And if somebody just decides they're not going to follow any of that, like, they have the ability to make you look really bad, because that's essentially what Mick Cronin, like, he totally picked that fight in like 3 different steps, and it's just a jerk move.
Well, I hope the flight home wasn't too much of a burden. I hope he got some sleep and was able to relax a little bit. Hope they
Yeah,
went too.
are we at some point going to have a conversation about how the Pac-12 men's basketball programs that went to the Big Ten are doing? Because they're just getting the ever-loving snot kicked out of them.
It's not good. It's not good. The one thing, and by the way, this is a Husky football podcast. We'll get to the news of the week here.
I don't give a rat's
shortly.
ass about the news of the week.
The one thing I'd push back on is that the UW men's basketball program was not faring well in the Pac-12 to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest reason why a school like Washington would struggle going to the Big Ten is the level of competition and their ability to acquire elite talent relative to the other schools they're facing. Did anybody think that this roster was lacking in talent going into this year? Is Hans Steinbach not a first-round NBA draft pick? Did they not acquire multiple players from USC who were very good in the Big Ten just last season? Is Zoom Diallo not a very good player?
At this point, I have no answers. It is the tradition of wasting one-and-done first-round talent extends now to 3 different coaches, and I have no explanation for why, when Washington gets talent, it can't win with it.
A tradition unlike any other.
It's 3 coaches in 2 conferences. It's unbelievable.
Plenty of talent, and they win, Danny. Had Chuck Olson Kia in Shoreline.
I've decided, do you remember it was the guy, he did a CSI Miami, He was originally from NYPD Blue, and at the beginning of each segment, he would have a one-liner, and he would put on his sunglasses, and then it would hit this guitar riff, so it would be like,
Yeah.
"Bad time to lose your head." That is going to be your for the next time when you make the seamless transition to Chuck Olson Kia. I'm going to have that guitar. We'll hit that thing.
Locally owned and operated since 1964. Family owned and operated by a family of University of Washington graduates with a friendly, low-pressure sales staff and a competitively priced selection of vehicles. Go to Chuck Olson Kia and ask for Henry Olson. And when you talk to Henry, tell him Say Who Say Pod sent you. This episode of Say Who Say Pod also brought to you by our friends at Husky Mobile. Husky Mobile is partnered directly with the University of Washington to offer affordable phone plans for the Husky community, with up to 7% of each bill going back to UW Athletics. Subscribers can also enjoy game day perks like fast pass lanes, seat upgrades, and giveaways, all while on T-Mobile's nationwide 5G network. Use code ONMontlake at checkout to get your first month free when transferring your number. Visit gohuskymobile.com to make the switch today. Thanks again to Husky Mobile for supporting today's show. Not terribly surprised, Danny, by the news Tuesday that Washington's offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Jimmie Dougherty and the school are parting ways. We still don't know details beyond that. He's been, he acknowledged publicly that he's moving on. Jed Fish tweeted, a nice message of farewell and good luck, and he's been removed from their staff page. We don't know, like, contractually, from an HR perspective, how this goes on the books. Was this Washington moving on? Is this Jimmie Dougherty moving on? Is it perhaps truly mutual? It's got a mutual vibe to it. And the timing to me suggests that this was not a simple case of Jed Fish coming to the conclusion after the season that this particular assistant is not cutting it and needs to be replaced. Those decisions are made in December. Those decisions are made immediately after the season ends. I don't know. It feels to me like maybe he's going to pursue an NFL position. I feel like we've been hearing the idea of the NFL tied to Jimmie Dougherty for a while now. I think it was Tom Pelissero. Would he work for the NFL Network? I can't keep those guys straight.
He does work for the NFL Network, but though that's going to soon become part of ESPN.
Right. So he'd reported last cycle when Dougherty was promoted to replace Brennan Carroll as getting the offensive coordinator title that he'd fielded NFL interest. And, it's not like there's any real, college openings right now that I think he would deem worth leaving the job he has now for. So I don't know if this is him wanting to be a play caller at some point, knowing that certainly is not going to happen at Washington. And if it is going to happen, maybe he needs to get in with a different staff, and maybe the quicker path to that is trying to find an NFL position coach job. I don't know how many viable jobs are open at the NFL level right now either. But
we essentially have kind of one staff that's being filled out at this point, and then the trickle down effects from there of it's basically Clint Kubiak's staff in Las Vegas, and then wherever he hires assistants from, the openings that are created there. What was the tip-off that made you think he wasn't long for the UW, or that there was some cooling that he might be moving on?
Yeah, so the first was that they had sent J.P. Losman out recruiting. J.P. Losman was hired last offseason when they kind of bulked up their, call it assistant staff, right? Like the assistants who work with the top 10 assistants. So Jimmie Dougherty coached the quarterbacks. They brought in J.P. Losman as, in the NFL, what you'd call the assistant quarterbacks coach. I think had been pretty high on him. He was very active at practice, working with the quarterbacks, working with Damon Williams Jr. He, was certainly not a in the background kind of guy. He was someone I think they really wanted to bring along and like build those relationships with the players on their roster. And I don't remember if he was at a school or if it was maybe Sione Cajo, the quarterback at Lincoln High School in Tacoma in the 2027 class. But anyway, he did an in-home visit with him. There was some, I think it was a 7-on-7 group or maybe a high school in California that had shared an Instagram post of, thanks to Coach so-and-so, Coach so-and-so, Coach so-and-so for coming out and visiting us. And JP Losman was in the photo. So that was like mid-January. I went and looked. The Cajo visit was January 18th. So that's a month ago now. And at the time I thought, that's a little odd. Typically it is those top 10 who go on the road recruiting. There's exceptions to be made, right? If a guy's just dealing with something, right, has a personal leave or a medical leave, or, I would imagine the instance of like a coach who's just had a new baby or something, like you can sub guys in and out. But it became pretty clear that like JP Losman was their off-campus, quarterback recruiter. And at the same time, I'm realizing like, Jimmie Dougherty's not like the most prolific social media guy, but I had noticed that he'd gone really quiet, like had basically not tweeted in weeks. The last UW related thing on his timeline was from like New Year's Day, like retweeting the Happy New Year thing from either the football program or the athletic department. And so taking all that together, I'm like, I wonder if something's going on with Jimmie Dougherty here. I actually asked somebody about it I think a couple weeks ago, and was told like, hey, I saw him in the building last week. So I don't think he'd like, cleaned out his locker, so to speak, by that point. But I from what I've been told, this has been, I think, in the works for weeks, I think, and was probably decided quite a while ago, or at least decided informally quite a while ago. I think you could draw the line pretty clearly from the fact that JP Losman took on all those, and also Jed Fish at his press conference, the kind of awkward DeMont Williams press conference, got a question about JP Losman and very much talked about him like he's going to be taking on more responsibilities. We want to bring him along. We want to get him out on the road to build those recruiting relationships and meet quarterbacks of the future, and made no mention of Jimmie Dougherty. Which is not like Jed Fish. Like if Jimmie Dougherty were still going to be their offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, and he was asked a question about the assistant quarterbacks coach, he wouldn't talk about him in a way that like kind of like undermined the coach who's above him on the depth chart, so to speak, on the org chart, which he pretty much did. So I kind of came away from that response thinking, that's interesting too. So I'm not terribly surprised by this.
It is what you mentioned was that when you have a staff change, it's usually in December. So if it was on Washington's end, one of the things I do find myself wondering though is that if they knew that there was going to be a change, and instead of cutting him loose in December, letting him see if he can find another job, without having announced a staff change, it's just unusual timing. It's a weird sequence of events, because unless Jimmie just truly decided he wanted to change, because for him, his path to becoming a head coach is going to require him calling plays. Like it is a very tough spot to get a job when you're in charge of an offense and not calling the plays. I mean, that's just generally true, because if someone's going to hire you to bring an offense there, they will have wanted someone who calls plays. That it's not always true. Like there are examples in the NFL of like Sean McVay's staff where people connected to the passing game get jobs, even though McVay is the one calling plays. But just in general, it is a clearer path to a head job when you're the guy who's in charge of one side of the ball. And that's not going to happen for Jimmie Dougherty while he's on Jed Fish's staff.
I got 2 spam calls literally in the time you were speaking. It's just getting out of control. I don't want to sell my house, guys.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Crying out loud. It's all day long. It's just all day. It's insane. You mentioned Kubiak, and it's kind of the first place my mind went, just with the timing. Like, reports first surfaced that he was a candidate with the Raiders like a good while before the Super Bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was probably right around the time the regular season was ending. So that's one, and I'm really speculating here, but like that's one possibility, right? Where maybe there's a whisper that, hey, you could be part of this staff, but they can't even officially hire the head coach until the Seahawks are done. They weren't done until they won the Super Bowl. So Jimmie Dougherty was at the Seahawks Super Bowl parade, by the way. I do know that. Follow him on Instagram. He posted a story about that. So he was as proof that he was still in town. Spitballing, but like that's just. But then, okay, if that were the case, why wouldn't they just make that hire? And it wouldn't be announced as him and his previous employer are parting ways, and then sometime later he gets a new job. It's just, oh yeah, the Raiders are hiring Jimmie Dougherty to do whatever. So that's the part that makes it a little bit odd.
Equally
too.
plausible that this has been something that was known for a few weeks but couldn't be finalized. Although I do have to say, if you're the Raiders and Mark Davis, and it's dangerous to put yourself in Mark Davis's head, because anybody who pays to have a haircut like he does, like, probably has some screwy things going on up top. But if somebody came to you and said, hey, we're going to hire Jed Fish's offensive coordinator from Washington, I know he hasn't called plays, but this is, you're Mark Davis, you're like, didn't we just do this? Didn't we just hire the offensive coordinator from Washington who wasn't calling plays, and didn't it not work out well? Because the reviews on Brendan Carroll were decidedly less than positive after Pete Carroll's dismissal. True,
although I don't think the thought ever entered anybody's mind that Brendan Carroll was going to call any kind of play.
That's true.
And it should be said too, like Kubiak hired an offensive coordinator already.
Yes.
So like if that is where Jimmie Dougherty winds up, it would not be as OC. I think he'd be hoping to probably get on, as a position coach and learn the ropes and parlay that into a play caller job down the road,
or a quality control job. Like, those are the quality control jobs in the NFL are oftentimes an entry path for guys. Those used to be kind of support staff positions, and that's actually not true. That you see a number of guys who are coordinator or guys on their way to becoming coordinators who take a quality control job for a year to become involved with a staff or kind of get their footing.
I mean, you follow the NFL a lot more closely than I do, and you talk to NFL personnel people. Is the quickest path to being an NFL play caller, are you better off attaching yourself to a big name like Sean McVay, to Kyle Shanahan, whatever it might be, as in any kind of role, any kind of job, just get on the staff? Is that your quicker path, or is it more about the position and the responsibilities that you hold? Are you better off being the quarterback's coach somewhere for some other coach and trying to kind of do it the old-fashioned way?
More responsibility is always better if you're looking at your trajectory. The most responsibility you can get is you would rather be the offensive coordinator for any team as opposed to quarterback's coach for Sean McVay and the Rams. Like, if you were given a choice between those and you're looking at your own trajectory, that's what you want. The more opportunity you have to show a clear-cut result of this is what I do. But the way to get to that coordinator job is definitely by finding a system that you can then apply. The reason that Shanahan and McVay assistants have become so popular is because each of those coaches, and there's overlap between those two dudes, but there is a whole system of how the run game fits together with the pass game. Like, there's a template that they're taking with them, and that is different from other coaching systems. Like, that it's more translatable in a lot of ways because it's been developed and there have been so many different coaches that have contributed and drawn from it. So the question of is it best to kind of become a disciple of someone? No, not necessarily, but when you've got an opportunity, and Jed's an interesting coach because he takes from a lot of different places, but that question of, I don't know if you would say like Jed has an overall template. Like, he adapts to his players in my mind more than you see someone like Kyle Shanahan's system, which is really, I mean, he's got a way of doing things and he needs a quarterback that can execute what he wants. I think Jed's shown a lot of flexibility with the quarterbacks that he's played with and has had in his time as a head coach.
So when Brennan Carroll left for the Raiders last year, it was the no-brainer of no-brainers to promote Jimmie Dougherty to that position. He already was paid like an offensive coordinator, and I would imagine already had a pretty good hand in the game plan week to week. He already coached the quarterbacks. It's always going to be my gut when the OC job, such as it is open on a Jedd Fisch staff, that they would look internal.
Mm-hmm.
He looked internal to replace Brennan Carroll as offensive line coach last year. I think Jedd Fisch likes having assistants to the assistants, so to speak, who he trusts to begin with and who can be ready to step into those position coach jobs should someone leave, which, by the way, Brennan Carroll was the first member of his offensive staff to leave. Carroll left. He promotes Michael Switzer, who was already on staff, to be O-line coach. He promotes Jimmie Dougherty to be OC. So we'll see what he does this time around. I think, I always look at the money with these kind of things with regard to like, who have you needed to go out of your way the most to keep happy? Who has the market dictated is most valuable, is most in demand? And on the offensive staff, with Jimmie Dougherty gone, that person is Kevin Cummings, who signed a 2-year deal last offseason that would pay him $725,000 this year to be receivers coach, which is a pretty hefty sum. I've been wondering if he might sign a new deal this year. I published at onmontlake.com last week some of the new contracts that have been agreed to. I was told there were others that were in the works that aren't final yet, and Kevin Cummings was not one of the ones that was final. So whether he's getting a new deal or not, I'm not totally clear on. But with Dougherty gone, he'd be the highest paid member of the offensive staff. I got to think in terms of other schools coming calling, he's probably the guy who would field most of that interest. He recruited and coached Teteroa McMillan. He coached Jacob Cowing. He coached Denzel Boston, recruited Desmond Roebuck. They had a very strong receiver class in 2025, another very strong receiver class in 2026 with a couple guys who are probably going to play right away. I think his reputation in the industry is only being burnished by the work he's done at Washington. And so maybe that's somebody you say, hey, here's an opportunity to be the offensive coordinator, albeit not the play caller, have a greater hand in the game plan. If you do want to go on and be an OC and eventually be a head coach, he's only 35. He's a young guy. Maybe that's a nice sweetener. I would imagine obviously a pay bump would come along with that. Jordan Paopao is 39 years old and has been a position coach for a little longer. He's developed obviously a bunch of NFL guys. I don't know what exactly Jedd Fisch is looking for in an OC role that doesn't call plays. There was a report that Matt Cavanaugh, who was a longtime position coach and offensive coordinator at the NFL level, I think hasn't coached since he was an analyst for the Jets in 2021, and is 69 or 70 years old. There's a report that he's had emerged as a name to watch who could join Washington's staff. I'd wait and see what position, what role that's for. My immediate assumption is not that this person would come to Washington with an offensive coordinator title necessarily. But even if he did, like I would remind, Jedd Fisch is the offensive coordinator, right? So, I think to me, that feels like you're making JP Losman the quarterback's coach, and now you need someone else, another voice, another set of eyes to work with the quarterbacks. And, perhaps his experience coordinating an offense at the highest level is just another hand helping like shape the game plan. But I wouldn't get like super hung up on how the title sorts itself out there.
The components of a college coach, and this is the fundamental difference between college staffs and NFL staffs, is that you balance sort of football knowledge and formulating an implementation of game plan with recruiting. You're not hiring Cavanaugh to come and be part of your recruiting. And it looks like Jedd Fisch has a really strong sense, the fact that JP Losman has been out on the road recruiting kind of lets you know where he fits in to the plans. That idea of how titles, when your head coach calls the plays, the actual delineation of titles on that side of the ball has more to do with salary, in my opinion, than it does with sort of what the actual day-to-day impact is on the team. Like Kavanaugh's not coming. If he ends up in Seattle, I see him as someone who is to help Jed formulate game plans and understand and sort of maximize the talent he has on hand, as opposed to doing the legwork, which is a significant part of what assistants do, is the recruiting component of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're promoting JP Losman to quarterbacks coach, which it sure seems certain they are, that's your 10 assistants right there. Like one out, one in. So that's your recruiting staff, so to speak. And you know, Aaron Van Horn, who's their outside linebackers coach, it's kind of interesting. Him and Chris Petrilli, who's the special teams coordinator, they're the only two like non-10 assistants, let's say, who have specific position titles like on the actual staff page. Even though everybody knows that JP Losman was the assistant quarterbacks coach, his actual title was just quality control offense. You know, Caleb Wilson, who helps Kevin Cummings with the receivers, he's the assistant receivers coach. Quality control offense. The guys who work with defensive position coaches, quality control defense. Aaron Van Horn actually had the title of outside linebackers coach, and you've seen him in some photos out on the road recruiting too. So I wonder if there's a defensive assistant who they've taken off the road, or maybe he was just like subbing in for somebody. But for the most part, you know, if we assume that's, you know, even if it is him and not another defensive assistant, like you've got your 10 recruiting staff. So I would not spend any time at all worrying about if they do bring in Matt Cavanaugh and what's his title. And even if his title suggests he'd be somebody who'd be recruiting, like they got their guys who are recruiting. Hey, it's pretty clear JP Losman's going to be recruiting their quarterbacks going forward. So he literally already is, like has been for weeks.
It's putting together staffs is such an interesting, it's like how you piece all of that together, and the energy on a college staff. I mean, energy is important on an NFL staff too, but that idea of how you build momentum as a program, you do want some young coaches. I think that having Losman in position to sort of assume those responsibilities as a quarterback coach, I think that can be a big boost of. I mean, that's a guy who's a former first-round pick and someone who is looking to get going in his coaching career. And this is not, now it's more than just a foothold. Like he's got a path to it. I all in all, like I'm generally, I was excited to see that Losman is getting more responsibilities now.
It's funny, like you see the tweet and all the replies are like, what? Like Washington's losing its offensive coordinator in mid-February? Like what's going on? That's crazy. Which is not the correct interpretation, because they're not losing their play caller, and yeah. But it's one of those things that, like, if you're not familiar with the staff structure and everything, it looks a lot worse coming across the timeline than it actually is. And that's not to say that they're losing nothing. I think Jimmie Dougherty is a very highly thought of offensive coach, and you know, there's probably a reason why he is parting ways with UW, because I think there probably is demand for his services that at some level is going to see him as a play caller. He was tied to the Colorado State head coach job when that was open.
Oh, the one that went to Mora?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it was just like maybe from like a CBS rundown of like what we're hearing about these other jobs, and he was one of like a handful of names they listed, but he has some juice is what I'm saying. JP Losman, former Seattle Seahawk.
For a hot minute, he was the first. John Schneider, the GM, has been trying for years to sort of catch lightning in a bottle with that rebound first-round pick. And JP Losman was one of the first where he tried to do it. Like, let's give him a good look-see. Before there was Sam Darnold, there was JP Losman, and any number of guys that had fallen by the wayside.
Been at Clemson, been at Oklahoma. He's 44, like Danny mentioned, was a first-round pick of the Bills in, I believe, 2004 out of Tulane. I think started 33 games at quarterback in the NFL. 44 appearances, something like that. I don't think he actually played for the Seahawks. I think he was just on the roster there for parts of that 2010 season, which was, Pete Carroll's second year?
2010 was his first. He was part of the
First year. Okay. Right. So, familiar enough with the landscape. Gotten his feet wet as a college football recruiter. Ian had an interesting question for us last week, actually, but we blew him off.
We did
because you were vacationing.
Because I was in the snow. I ate fugu in Japan. Are you familiar with fugu?
I'm not. I saw your pictures. It looked intriguing.
It is a blowfish. It is sashimi. It's kind of a little stronger than a whitefish, but it's the blowfish. You need a special license to serve, because if you cut it the wrong way, it can be lethal.
Oh.
I take
it you didn't get the lethal version?
No, it was delicious. Quite tasty. Here is our question, our conversation with IP McFarland.
Good morning, guys. We're playing hurt today. I haven't really left my office where our guest bed is in a couple of days, so may as well hit record. The biggest news in all levels of Pacific Northwest football this week was obviously North Dakota State just announcing that they're moving up to FBS, and Bobby Hawk leaving Montana for the Illinois DC job. Couple those with Sean Lewis, Washington State losing coaches in back-to-back years for what would otherwise be perceived as lateral moves had the Pac-12 stayed together. And all signs point to having to get to higher levels in order to be in the game in college football. We're in the off season. Let's dance. What do you think is going to be the end result of this? Is it the separation of school and football player and make them actual junior pros, kind of? Is it a super league where the smaller schools or the quote unquote lesser programs act as preseason games, and then you're just playing a quasi NFL schedule? What do you think is going to happen and when? Fun to think about. Some people say this is the end of college football. I don't happen to be in that camp. I think the product on the field keeps getting better, even if it's kind of gross when you look away from the field. Hope you guys have a good week. Go Dogs.
I definitely don't think it's the end of college football. I do think we're in a strange transition time. And I don't know if I expected the question of scheduling to become as central. Like, I've found myself thinking about scheduling a lot. The non-conference that you mentioned, but also the conference games. It's weird that the conferences are so big that the actual strength of your conference schedule can vary as much as it does. Like, I have found myself feeling that the Big Ten should have two divisions, even though we've seen what that looks like and know that it doesn't work. I was like, it's weird that you can have a Big Ten schedule and the difference between two teams in the same conference is pretty dramatic. I am worried. I'm worried about how the non-conference scheduling is going, though, because I do think we're going to see, I think back to last year's game between Texas and Ohio State, and I think that those kind of games are really good for college football. And I definitely feel that we're going to get less of those as this current template plays forward.
Yeah, I think the TV networks are going to want more valuable inventory week in, week out. Like, I think we're going to get to the point where if you look at Washington's schedule on a year-by-year basis, I don't even necessarily mean like the schedule they're playing this year, although I guess it could stand in this way. You don't want to be able to circle the first three games and say, well, nobody's going to watch these.
Yeah.
Right? You want an NFL type schedule where every single one of these games, holds the same value, right? Holds the same weight in the standings. The Seahawks don't just need to beat the 49ers, Cardinals, and Rams. They got to beat everybody they play.
Yes.
That's what determines the conference standings, the conference division championship. So I think that we're going to move toward, call it the good teams playing the good teams on a more regular basis.
How?
So I think a Super League is inevitable. I think an NFL-style college football Premier League with, and I won't pretend to have any clue the timeline of this. It seems quite unlikely it would happen before at least the Big Ten's TV contract is up in 2030 or 2031. But I think it's inevitable that like the top 24 or 32 or 40, maybe even the schools we traditionally think of as the Power Five, and we could argue about, well, who among the current G6 belongs in that category, because obviously like teams have been relegated, and some large number of teams will be invited and buy in to competing at the highest level of the sport. The players must be employees.
Mm-hmm.
They must. There's just no two ways around that. We're wasting our time on any solution short of that. With a union, with collective bargaining, with codified salary cap, if that's the way you want to do it, with codified guidelines and rules on how to pay players and player acquisition. Okay? So that the first time a school's booster club decides that they're going to break those rules, because someone will do it, there will be real consequences that will make everyone else go, oh shit, this is a different ball game. We really can't cheat anymore. Like they're actually serious. This is like this was not worth it. We got to get to that, and I think so. It'll be whether you cut it up again geographically and say these are the teams that are going to compete against one another out west, the Southern Division, but then will there be a draft? Because as long as you can recruit your roster, the schools located closer to the largest pools of talent will continue to recruit the best players, even if there's a salary cap. On average, those margins will become a lot more narrow. So I don't know how you begin to address that with as many players as would need to be drafted in a given year. As to the question of whether schools break away, or college football programs break away from universities, I really hope that doesn't happen. I think that's the point at which you start to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. I think that fans already can acknowledge that the idea of a student athlete doesn't mean what it meant in 1983.
Mm-hmm.
You're hearing more and more about players who take classes online. I know of guys who, don't even live in Seattle, right? They've had condos in Bellevue or whatever, who are not particularly connected to the university community as it is. So I don't want to pretend like, as we sit here in 2026, like, no, don't kill this idealized version of college football players who are totally just like any other student. Like, it hasn't been that way for a while. But there's enough connection. We talked about this, over and over again, right? To continue loving college football the same way that you always have. And it's not this way for everybody. Some people don't care. I've asked this as a poll question, and like it's a non-insignificant number of people who reply and say like, whatever. I'd prefer that not be the case, but whatever. I'm still gonna watch. I care about what happens on the field, and as long as somebody called the Washington Huskies or wearing purple and playing football at Husky Stadium, I'll watch. But there are people, and I believe you're one of them, who need to have some belief that the players they're watching shared their college experience in some way. And if you can no longer believe that anybody on that field has sat in a class at Kane Hall, has walked across Red Square, has stopped for a sandwich at By George, if that's even still a thing. Has studied in Odegaard, has taken a nap in the reading room at Suzzalo, whatever. If that's just no longer a thing, I think that's where you lose your connection. But it's where you lose your connection with season ticket holders and with diehards. The game, the sport itself, and I think you're seeing this now, could simultaneously become more and more popular each year with casual football fans across the country who may come to watch college football the same way that they watch the NFL. There's an NFL game on. It's Thursday night. The Thursday night game's on. It's Monday. The Monday night game's on. I might not care who wins. I might not be a fan of either team playing, but it's on my TV, right? And so, like, if all you have are the big brands playing the big brands, those type of viewers, which, by the way, are the viewers that networks already prioritize. And when the University of Washington, even at the campus level, at the administrative level, at the presidential level, talks about the exposure, the greater exposure you get in the Big Ten, playing on the networks that Big Ten football teams play on, they mean exposure for the university. They mean ads for the University of Washington. They mean that they are getting their brand and their logo and the idea of the University of Washington as a school in Seattle in front of more people. That there's an enrollment factor to that too, that helps. But purely from like a football viewership standpoint, you're just trying to become more familiar with people who are going to maybe watch you on a casual basis, right? Like if you're good enough, you might make new fans, bandwagon, diehard fans from other parts of the country in the Midwest who, why are you such a big UW fan? You grew up in Iowa. Well, like Michael Penix and Rome Odunze were killing it when I was growing up. I thought they were the coolest team ever. They ran a sick offense. I was 6 years old, and I've always loved UW. Maybe you get a few one-off of that instance. The TVification of college football, the broader point is that it mostly serves to expand the casual viewership of the sport. And so I'm not as gung-ho about many others about celebrating record ratings. Like, hey, that's great. Like, I don't disagree that the sport is as good on the field as it's ever been. Chris Peterson was on our show and said, hey, if anything, I think it's better. It's as good as ever. I don't disagree. I worry that most decisions being made in college football with regard to capturing more viewers and growing the sport are targeting casual supporters while alienating the people who buy tickets and are the biggest fans of the schools individually.
I'm going to make a huge stretch here, but it's what occurred to me as you were talking. It is not entirely different from the thought process that newspapers have had as they sought to transition to a digital age, which is that we have an established readership that is getting older and in some cases literally dying off. And we're migrating to a digital product, which is our website. And we hope that eventually the audience on that digital product is able to sort of fill and provide the support that we used to get from the actual paper product audience. And the challenge that comes up is that it is the people who are casual supporters don't end up being as valuable in terms of the support that they end up providing as that group, what you would say is sort of that core audience that you've kind of neglected as you changed the focus of your business. Because I do think that it's clear that TV ratings and the expansion of those, like that is the most valuable real estate for college football programs is and the teams themselves is the ratings that they generate, the TV audience. That's the primary customer. But in part, that's because they take the in-person audience for granted. That's this mature, like fully developed, that's always going to be there, and they're going to love us no matter what they do. And I agree with what you're saying. Like at some point, if you completely break the bond that group feels, that you might be in free fall. And that's certainly the direction that I fear that it's going. I'm never going to stop watching college football, I don't think. But it does start to change the relationship you have with the sport when you're seeing that, like, okay, everything here is built around the TV audience, and this being marketed and getting people to see it from across the country rather than the people who are actually around the team or went to the school. It's a challenge they have as a business, but when you seek to, college football seems very determined to shape itself into NFL light. And so maybe you're right. Like the long term, it being a super league where all games are as equal, or sort of the quality of the games is more regulated than it is now, where you've got 3 non-conference games, which one of them can be really good. One of them will almost certainly be very lopsided, and maybe one's in between. Like that's kind of the best case scenario, I think, now for non-conference schedules. But when you have schools that are like, we really need everyone we can get, you start getting these cupcake diets.
The compromise might be, build out a 12, and, that's another conversation. How long is 12 going to be the number for regular season? Shoot, the NFL's trying to add a 17th, and now they're trying to add an 18th. Like, maybe you build out the 12-game schedule, the regular season, and say, like, these are all going to be tough games that count against teams that are competing for the same championship that you are. And now your old non-conference schedule becomes your preseason, and you can actually treat it like the preseason, which is what some teams already do, but you can't do it all the way because you got to make sure you win the game, and you got to make sure you win the game by enough so that it's not like a blight on your schedule when the playoff committee comes to evaluate you at season's end and all those things. Let Washington treat UC Davis like a preseason game. Let them decide that, we're not, DeMond's going to play the first quarter of this game, the first half of this game, and then not at all in this game. And still our fans are going to be able to watch 12 full football games with our full squad trying their hardest. Maybe you get there if you're really trying to like take it to the NFL extreme. On the idea of schools not being associated with football teams, not being associated with schools anymore, I really see that as one of the only factors. And it's not the only factor, but like to me, that's on a really, really short list of things that could materially harm interest in the sport long term. Because I don't think NIL is an existential threat. I don't think the transfer portal is an existential threat. I think that this is a weird period after, and we've talked about this before, decades of doing it the wrong way, decades of players not getting anywhere near what they deserved. It wasn't going to be perfect when all the regulations got rolled back.
Mm-hmm.
And so all kinds of nonsense has filled the void. That's going to get sorted out.
I agree.
Like the pay structure, the salary structure, that's going to get sorted out. Player movement and length of contract and durability of contract, like that stuff's going to get sorted out. It's going to get codified. We're going to have collective bargaining. Is it going to be in place by 2030? I have no idea, but like, it's the only way.
Yeah.
It's the only way. So, and look, there's precedent for student employees being granted union status,
mm-hmm.
right? Like in my last interview with Anamari Kause before she left as president, she said, yeah, I mean, the teacher's assistants unionizing, and you know what? They unionized and we found a way through it, and it's fine.
Yes.
College football, a little bit different enterprise than student teaching assistants, but there is at least precedent for students on campus who are legitimately students, whose primary function is as a student, which obviously like college football players are not, and and will be to an even lesser degree once we have collective bargaining and their employees. But both things can coexist together. I really think where you lose people locally at the campus level, at the season ticket holder level, at the donor level, is where you start to try to raise money for people playing football wearing the school colors who are not students at the school. I've even wondered if there's like a happy or at least a happy medium. A lot of people wouldn't be happy with it, but some sort of compromise there where it's not required, but it's offered. And like, at least there are a lot of people on the team attending classes. At least, Kyle Whittingham, I think, is like the only coach, or at least the most prominent coach, who has voiced this publicly of like, hey, you think it's all crazy now, like just wait until the players don't have to be students anymore. So I don't know that there's a ton of movement around that, but there are a lot of people in the industry sort of forecasting that that's the direction it's headed. And that's, I thinking existentially, I think too about like, will the TV money always be there? You're relying so much on these TV contracts to fund everything. Will networks always be able to pay more and more and more and more and more every contract? Or is that going to dry up at some point and they realize that either this isn't worth it or they just flat out don't have the cash to do that? Then what happens? Have you read Chuck Klosterman's new book by chance?
I was going to bring it up in this conversation.
I'm almost done. I haven't quite got to his central thesis, which is that like football won't continue to be as popular in our country as it is now.
It's that the sport is doomed.
Yes, doomed, he says. I don't necessarily agree, but I also don't know what exactly I'm disagreeing with because I haven't gotten to that part of the book. But I do think about that, right? Like the head injury piece of it and how violent it is. And already the rules are changing. And, participation in West Coast sports in high school football is down. Kids are playing football. Kids are starting tackle football at older ages now, which I think is good. But, it does something happen? We're doing a SWOT analysis here. These all go under the threats category. Do we get to a point in this country where playing football is just not a popular, cool thing to do anymore, and kids don't get into it because it's so violent, and more data emerges about how terrible this is for your head, how terrible even minimal contact is for your head? These are the things I think like if you had to plot a course for how football becomes less popular in our country, like these are the things I think about. I would imagine that that's probably part of Klosterman's analysis as well. I'll let you know when I get there. But
the book Christian's mentioning, it's just called Football. It's a really handsome looking book too. It's like this red book by Chuck Klosterman. The basic thesis is that football is the last remnant of monoculture. And if you'd understand monoculture as sort of the era when we had three main news networks that we all talked about basically the same things. We had an agreed set of facts. There was a common communication. That everything else has dissolved. It's siloed, and football, and even more specifically the NFL, is the one thing that has survived and is in some cases thriving, a sport that basically none of the rest of the world cares about, yet is 93 of the top 100 viewed programs, television programs in our country are football. And then kind of like Christian says, the second part of it, that the sport, as popular and dominant as it is eventually doomed. But it's I like his writing. There's a philosophical element to it, and he's just constantly kind of questioning why he thinks or if he's actually right about the things he believes. But it's a great exploration of the sport in general and sort of why it has come and the different ways it's come to mean things to us that I found thinking about for myself, like why I've spent a huge amount of time professionally writing about the NFL, and personally, like college football is the one thing I really, really care about and love. It's a very interesting time. The other thing that I found myself thinking as you were talking, Christian, is I haven't really I haven't really thought about what it would be like if college football had an actual salary cap, because my assumption is that people will cheat. And then I realized that, well, I don't assume that NFL teams cheat on the salary cap, even though it probably makes sense that they probably do. Like, I might be too Pollyanna-ish there. Like, there was a case in the late 1990s where the Broncos were found to have circumvented the salary cap. And there's a current sort of crisis or furor story about the Clippers circumventing the salary cap with Kawhi Leonard that Pablo Torre's been investigating. But in general, I kind of accept pro payrolls as that they all abide by the rules. And maybe I'm naive in that way, but I just don't think you're possibly going to be able to make college programs like actually honor. I have an innate distrust of their willingness or ability to abide by any salary restrictions that will be placed on them.
See, cheating's built into the fabric of college football. It's part of the DNA.
So, in a way, if you told me it doesn't exist, I wouldn't believe it.
I know, and if you structure the rules in a way that legitimately stamps it out, like, it's not college football anymore. if there's going to be real consequences for cheating, like, this is not the product. What happened to the country I love? God damn it!
It's so funny. I just don't ever consider that there would be a big enough Seahawks fan that would decide, like, I'm going to get this free agent by driving over $5 million to him. But I'm like, God knows that there's car dealers all over this country that'll trick themselves off to drop a car on some high school recruit. Absolutely.
There's no salary cap in it's a very different sport, different culture, but there's no salary cap in baseball, and you don't have Mariners fans chipping in to try to make the biggest swing possible at the top free agent. And by the way, like, Klosterman's a huge football fan. It's not like someone who hates the sport trying to like stamp it out.
He's as crazy as the rest of us. He might be even crazier because his favorite team is the Dallas Cowboys, and he doesn't actually like them or cheer for them. He's just like beholden to them.
It's like, this is somebody who I think would be devastated if football went away. It's just it's an idea he's interrogating. Those are all like huge big picture stuff that, if we legitimately were talking about existential threats, like, you'd have to bring that idea, like the giant overarching idea that the sport of football just will not have the same hold on the American public in 30 years as it has now. Keeping the scope more narrow, like, that's where the college football players remaining students, I think, is going to be an essential thing. And I think it's going to come under attack. I think that there's going to be exploration of merely associating with the university and playing at the stadium and licensing its marks and wearing its uniform, but it's a separate entity and the players don't necessarily have to be students. And I think that'd be a bad idea. So when I think of like ways that this could go sideways, that's where my head goes. I do think we're headed to a super league. I do think we're headed to collective bargaining. I think if it's just that, the sport has limitless potential to grow and be popular and be great and still attract, the type of people who have always loved college football, because we would live in a more structured world where another school can't poach a kid off of your roster with no rules and no repercussions. And in some ways, we're already getting there, right? I mean, it couldn't be done with Damon Williams Jr. The contract. So I don't think the sport is doomed unless it goes too far, toward professionalization where the players flat out aren't students anymore. So basically, I think college football will be fine as long as it's college football. How about that?
Yeah, I'm a little bummed that Montana isn't on Washington's schedule this year, because then we could have theoretically had the matchup between the 9th-year senior at defensive end for Montana and the 7th-year guard, Garen Hatchett, for UW.
16 years of collective college experience.
That dude is turning 26. He's married with 2 kids. He started college a year before Devin Witherspoon.
He would have been a 2018 recruit.
Yeah, 2018. 2018 is when he went to USC. I mean, I guess in his defense, he's played. This is going to be the 4th actual season he played. He played a full season at USC, then half a season, then last year played at Montana, but still 9th-year senior.
Yeah. So that same class as like Jacob Sermon, Colson Yankoff, Tuli Latuli Nasanoa, Marcus Spiker,
Yeah.
Austin Osborne.
Yeah. When did the eligibility thing? I think it started because I got confused during COVID of how much eligibility guys had left, and now it's just like you can't calculate it at all. Like you have no idea how much time a guy has left to play because now junior college doesn't count. What?
Well, it does. The waiver for junior college was just last year because of the Pavia case. Now you'd have to pursue a waiver. You'd have to file. You'd have to sue. You'd have to. So, like, I know Ontario Thompson was, I think, like at least exploring the idea, but it wasn't like a clear path. You gotta fight for it.
Oh, you still have to. Okay, it wasn't like a precedent was set. Now you can just nuke your junior college doesn't count.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll get to that point, but
And
again, like, hard to say that you cannot pursue this 6-figure earning opportunity simply because you have done it for a set number of years. That's tricky legally, so I'm not surprised that people are challenging this.
I'm not surprised either. Have you read any of the Trinidad Chambliss, the Ole Miss quarterback?
That was some fun testimony.
The judge really has it out for the NCAA. I don't have any strong opinions about whether Trinidad Chambliss should play or not. Like, it doesn't bother me if he plays again. It is extremely funny that part of the dispute with the NCAA, and the NCAA ruled there was not enough contemporaneous documentation that Chambliss's tonsillitis affected his respiratory system, preventing him from playing that year, and should result in a medical red shirt. Like, that is objectively funny.
Well, if there's anything the NCAA are experts on, it's tonsillitis.
Serious, you did not document his tonsillitis extensively enough to our satisfaction.
I did not anticipate going for an hour on February 18th.
Do you think that people liked it? I hope they did. I mean, we got into the weeds when we're doing a Chuck Klosterman book review, but I'm really fascinated by all these things about where college football goes and sort of how it affects sort of my feelings and interest about it. Because I honestly, like, as a fan, I don't know. I know that I'm still invested. I know that the Damon Williams thing did not piss me off as much as it pissed off some other fans, but I respect the fact that it bothered other people. It's a very odd time for the sport.
No question. We will be back next week to talk about it, I think. We'll talk to you then.
What was your thought in the student section chanting Booker's name?
I could give a rat's ass about the other team's student section.
I just meant overall the way that you
I would like to give you a kudos for the worst question I've ever been asked.
All right,
Did you like
You should take it.
the preparation of the...
You really think I care about the other team's
No, I don't.
student
I don't
section?
think you care about the other.
Are you raising your voice at me?
No, I'm just.
Yeah, you
talking
are.
to
Yeah, you are. Come on, dude.
Not raising.
Come on. Yes, you are. Everybody's standing here listening to you. Everybody. This is on camera. They can hear you. I answered the question. I could give a rat's ass about the other team's student section. I coach UCLA. I don't care about Michigan State students. I mean, who cares?